IVM.
Welcome to the season finale of Getting Meta 2021. I've had some exceptional guests over the last 9 episodes, and I'd like to think each one of them offered something different. And today, I want to end this season with an interview with somebody who is truly inspiring. I'm absolutely thrilled to have on Srini Swaminathan as a guest, Srini091 on Twitter and Instagram. Srini is best known for being extremely active in the social service space, having organized several fundraisers, COVID reliefs. He was on ground for the farmer protests, was a part of Teach for India, and so much more. I'm sure I've missed so much out. But even if you exclude that, there is so much to talk to Srini about. He is an active marathoner. He's cycled from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Kutch to Guwahati. He is also just an incredible guy, eternally optimistic, lots of stories. He started his life in poverty, but he's led an extremely rich life. He's written a book on sustainability as well, which, happily coincides with the release of this episode. It was released end August. In this interview, we speak about a lot of things. His childhood and how that shaped him, how he himself changed from a sheltered life in poverty to now scary, huge new college, to working in oil fields in Venezuela, leaving a lucrative job to become a teacher, to trying out endurance sport. Lots of things. What else? We speak about learning from bad experiences, planning for the worst case scenario, having near-death experiences. He's had 4 of them. Probably the first guest of mine who's had those, or at least has admitted to having those, and what he learned from that, staying positive and asking why. And how that simple question has driven everything that he's done, including being on the show. In fact, before we recorded for this, he grilled me on why he should be on the show. And even after listening to the first few episodes of Getting Meta that was released a few months back, he pinged me to ask why he should still be on this show. And I'm sure you, the listener, after these next 2 hours, will have no doubts as to why I had him on. This is one of the most personal interviews I've done. Srini digs deep into his own life, and I think it sets a lot of color and context for so many of the lessons that he has, even if he, formally doesn't say that. So even if you're not in this for the productivity or mental models or whatever it is that this podcast was supposed to give you in the first place, I think you will thoroughly enjoy this conversation and be inspired by it. All right, that's enough of me talking. Let's head right to this conversation with the inspiring, the wonderful Srini Swaminathan. Srini, thank you so much for being a part of this, man. Thank you for being a part of the first season of Getting Meta.
Thank you, Deepak, for inviting me for this. I'm quite excited to talk to you and have fun.
There's so much for us to talk about. I mean, so I have been guilty of checking out all that you do. Only very recently, and with each bullet point that I see, it's like, what a guy! Like, holy crap! Like this, like each point is an episode by itself, I think, and I think there's so much of what you're doing that's truly inspirational. I think there's a lot of terrain for us to cover, and with your background in cycling, I think I can literally say that there's a lot of different kinds of terrain to cover as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. More so because of the mini podcast, unrecorded podcast that we had just a while before this, and for those listening, Srini had. Basically grilled me on why I have asked him to come on this show, what the show is all about. And then he was just telling me something about why he loves understanding the why. And I think that's a great place to start, actually, Srini. And I cut you off over there because I said, we should definitely be hitting the record button over here. So why don't you just continue what you were saying over there?
Yeah. I think all my life I've been a curious cat. I'm just curious and I observe very keenly. And this is something that people have observed about me and told me. And sometimes they worry if my brain is overheating, because like, why are you observing so much, or like, what makes you observe so much? Or in a negative way, some people like my brother will say that you observe too much, and this is not okay, or this is going to get you into trouble or something. Though I would say it has hardly ever got me into trouble. My curiosity, my keen observation of things, and also remembering that, what are the things I observed, and that's very useful, to recall, to reproduce, or for something as simple as, say, gifting, right? There is often a notion that, finding gifts for men is so difficult and all that. I'm like, not really. Men, women, any gender, they are just humans, and just by observing, you can figure out what are the things that people are interested in, or in general, even inanimate things, right? So then my curiosity always leads to this why behind things. Why is this certain way? Why was that designed in such a way? And okay, also if I see something wrong or something not okay or imperfect, and I go behind the psychology. Okay, why did this human leave a pile of debris on the road after digging a trench? That leads to the systemic issues and other things. So yeah, I always look at the why behind. Why do we do certain things?
Yeah, I think that I had absolutely no doubts that we would digress off into many bylines during this conversation. When I put down my questions for you, I was very key. I had to force myself to limit myself. Because I knew that for every one question that I put down, there'll be 4 or 5 others that we just branch off into. And I actually want to pick off on one of those right now. It's amazing that you talked about curiosity. Do you think curiosity and empathy, in some sense, go hand in hand? Because you kind of like want to put yourself in the other person's shoes to understand where they're coming from, what's stopping them from taking a certain action, or why they think the way they do. Because whatever you're saying, that curiosity and all that you were talking about right now, it's something that the titans of corporate industry have been trying to do for a long time. We want a user, you want a UX researcher who understands the mind of the consumer, and all that. Essentially what all these roles are looking for, be it a marketing person, be it a so-called growth hacker, if you are in the startup world. It's all essentially about some intersection of curiosity and empathy. And a little bit of executional ability as well, which is arguably easier to build. But
no, I agree with that. I think that's a beautiful point, that curiosity and empathy go hand in hand, and if they go hand in hand, it can result in beautiful things, right? Or even just in a very basic way, better understanding of the world around us, of the people around us, and their lived experiences, right? One of the earliest examples of this was when I joined Teach for India in 2010, as a, and one of the initial things they do is an activity where they take you into a low-income community, and you spend a day with, so they assign you to someone in the low-income community. It's all very well planned in a very thoughtful way, of course, and they assign you to someone and say, okay, you be with this person and live their life for the entire day. And in the evening, you come back and we do a debrief where in small groups, big groups, we share our experiences, right? The whole idea is for you to live their life and see what it is like. So, sometimes you're assigned to someone who picks waste, sweeps the cities, or even goes and washes washrooms, toilets, whatever. And that experience, right, where you are curious about, okay, what is this person's everyday life like, which if you have the empathy and kindness and also relatability, right? Okay, I can relate to some of these things, and that is very essential also as a teacher, because as a primary school teacher, if you do not have the interest, curiosity, and empathy in a child's life, you will tend to miss a lot. Again, that goes to, okay, why is a child not able to learn? Why is a child not retaining what she learned? And there, the answer for that could be in the intersection of curiosity.
That was beautifully put, and I think we might have actually covered some questions that I actually wanted to ask you a little later. So I'm going to ask the first question that I actually have written out for you, and I think a great place to start would actually be your efforts during the past 1 year. So, firstly, congratulations on being awarded a COVID Soldier of India. I think that's this exceptional, so much inspiration to take from what you've done. So I'd just like to start very blue sky and just ask you, what were you doing when COVID first struck last year? How you reacted, and what spurred you on to then get involved on ground? And if you could just, it's a very broad starting point, but I think there's a lot of ground to go.
I would say like last year when I would start actually in February, because every February we go to Auroville for the Auroville Marathon, and at that time I had already been reading about coronavirus, right? And I remember me and my runner friends in Chennai, we were discussing should we go or not, because our concern last February was Auroville attracts a lot of people from outside India. And what if they bring the virus and we get infected? So should we go or not? And after a lot of debate and talking to people and all that, we decided, okay, we'll go, but we'll wear a mask and run. So we went, and back then there was nothing. This was February 2nd week, but we still wore the mask. We ran, and hardly anybody was wearing one or following any of this thing, because nothing was compulsory back then. So we come back from Auroville, and in sometime in March is when all the cases started appearing, and the lockdown happened, and I was home, and looking at all the migrant worker crisis unfold in front of you was very, very hard for me, because I have always believed that we are all migrants. There is no நாம் எல்லோரும் வந்தேரிகளே, they say in Tamil, Tirukkural Arivu says. So we are all migrants, and be it internal migrants, external migrants, it doesn't matter. I mean, boundaries and the country maps and everything are man-made, whereas we have always moved around the world for livelihoods and so on. And in Sweden, where I used to go a few years ago to work with children and families who have come from other countries, right? What is known as refugee children. In Sweden, they have a term for them. They are called new arrivals. So they refuse to use the term migrant or refugee and so on. And I wanted to share that. It's quite beautiful, working with children who have come from other countries. So when I saw this crisis unfold in front of me, I felt utterly helpless. Of course, I was feeling angry that how did we even allow something like this to happen? This shouldn't be happening. And okay, that's another topic though. I mean, our leaders, how could they, knowing India as a country made up of people in low-income communities who are internal migrants, how could you let this happen? And I did try to go out, but even just to go and buy vegetables, once I was almost beaten up by the police. Like they came swinging the lathi at me. So I had to tell them, no, my house is here. I'll never step out again. So I went back home, and I was pretty worried. At the same time, being someone in the social sector, I felt, what can I do about this? I want to do something. So that's when I put together 100, ration kits. Like some food you can eat immediately, some food you can eat during the journey. And again, this all goes back to another question that has largely driven me, especially in the last 10 years. If I could, I would just like paint my entire room with that question, which is, what will I do about it? The I is the most important word there. Like, what will I do about it? And this is largely driven why I do what I do over the last 10 years is, so I saw these things happen. Of course, I was outraging on Twitter and Instagram, and then I came to a point where again, okay, look, I think I forgot this question. What will I do now? Right. And so I put together those 100 kits. I just spent some savings in that, and I went to the Chennai station. Of course, I did take help from a cop I knew, railway cop, and he said, "Go and meet someone. Don't worry about it. I'll give you the initial protection, making sure that you're not beaten up or anything." So I took his word. I went, and then I realized, what I had brought was just a drop in the ocean. There were thousands and thousands of them leaving every day, and I felt like an utter failure at that time. That does this even make any difference? Then I told myself, okay, for those 100 people, it makes a difference, because it has not just immediate requirement of food, but also dry food that will help them for the next 2 days. So then I said, I stepped back and asked, can I replicate this for thousands of people? That was impossible, because I had spent 10,000 rupees just to put together 100 kits. And the moment I thought, even to serve one train full of people, it's going to cost me lakhs. And I was wondering, where can I raise that much funds? And I know how difficult it is to raise funds these days. I've raised funds online for 10 years now. And it's getting increasingly difficult, because, you can 5 minutes, you can set up a fundraising website. And you are essentially competing for the same pool of
generosity
funds from generosity, right? Because corporates, CSR and high net worth individuals and others, they give for big causes, and they all get something out of it. But small causes like this, crowdfunding, is very difficult, because you have only certain circles, and a lot of circles intersect these days. My social media, my network. And so just thinking about it made me feel like, how is this even, what can even do? Even just serving food and water. So at that point, I want to pause and say that something, when I look back at my last 10 years of being in the social sector or doing good sector, one thing that has helped me immensely is being consistent with showing up, being consistent with sharing, right? So show up, serve, share. That's been my model. Of course, I didn't really think I will do this, but I think when I look back and see, my follower count is pretty, I would say, just average. I don't have a blue tick, nor am I well known in the sense that I'm not a celeb, I'm not a big. But how could I raise so much? I raised more than 53 lakhs, served nearly 2 lakh people, in 1 year. How has this been possible? Then I tell myself, I think it's the journey. It's what I've been consistently sharing, whether or not I have an audience. So I do not backward plan from what's the outrage this is going to create, how many likes and shares is this going to get. No, even if my sharing is imperfect, my English is imperfect, or the pictures are not great, I believe that when you do good, or when you see something, when you have stories of people that need to be shared and amplified, share. Show up consistently and share. And there will be a lot of people who are silently observing what you are doing. And when the time comes, they will recall, all that you have done, and, they will support you. They may have never ever talked to you before, not even a like, but they will suddenly come and give you 50,000 rupees for a cause. So I think showing up is important consistently, whether you fail and also share genuinely. That is something I believe in. Just share genuinely, whatever your frustrations, failures are. Show up that you're a human.
There's so much of much of what you said, which I'm just taking it to another industry altogether. In a day and age where every brand is trying to figure out how to be more authentic. What you say is exactly that. You can't manufacture authenticity. You can't manufacture stories. You can't say nice lines and pass it off as saying, "Hey, listen, because I believe in these 3-4 lines, I stand for these," which is really about, like you said, I think 3 things that you said are beautiful, and they are interestingly enough, you went in this order, which is show up, serve, and share. And it's almost like brands that are trying to, or anyone who's trying to shortcut the system tries to go the other way. They first share, and then they, the showing up is, brands say they stand for one thing, but do you really, or is it just a nice thing for you to put up a slogan saying Black Lives Matter and get some social capital out of that? No, that's beautiful. Just, I think. It is beautiful, and it clearly shows how much something like this moves you and affects you. And it's I have always been envious of people who are able to feel something for other people, for other communities. Even like, for example, I have never been, and again, I'm going into spaces completely different from what you're talking about right now, but I have never been able to, say, passionately support a certain football club, for instance. Right? Because for me, I find it a little weird to be able to give part of, my soul or something of that sort to something which is completely artificial at the end of the day. For me, but it's exceptional that you are able to feel this much empathy for the community, and for you, it's almost natural that hey, yeah, I mean, this is something that needs to be done, and there is a lot in this itself that I want to talk about, but we'll come to that a little later. And it's interesting that you got the COVID Soldier of India award from Dimant Parekh, who was a previous guest on the show, so there we have a little bit of a connect already. So I want to actually rewind the clock and start a little bit from the beginning. You have a bio on your About Me page, which starts it starts startlingly, if I may, which is hailing from a low-income community in South India, graduating from college, which you play down a lot. That college is Bits Pilani, on a government scholarship. Changed my life. Tell us about that early life, and sort of like what values it gives you. I believe that it's the experiences that experiences and things that we go through when we're young that end up shaping you and sort of ultimately decide what path you end up taking. And certainly that's been the case for a lot of the guests that I've had on the show. I'm very curious to know whether this has been the same for you as well.
Yeah, I would say my first 17, 18 years of life was, the predominant emotion was just, I think, fear and anxiety. I was born in Coimbatore, low-income family. My father, unfortunately, because of alcoholism, he passed away when I was 7, and that affected my family a lot. And that's why actually till the age of 27, I said, I'm not touching alcohol. So I think I saved a lot of money also. But because of that thing that I was like, okay, alcohol ruins families, so I will not touch alcohol. It was a bit dramatic, but well, okay, but then I said, okay, I'm an adult now. I can be mature about this.
If I may, that's the one same thing that Donald Trump actually did, which is the exact same thought that you went through. I think it was either his brother or his cousin that died because of alcoholism, because of which, ironically, Trump is the only teetotaler US president. Yeah. So anyway, I did not mean to equate you with Trump, but there we go.
No. I mean, this is a good thing. I mean, I saved a lot of money. I also stayed sane, whatever. But my mother, who's a big inspiration. She herself is a school dropout, and she would tell us stories from her childhood about wanting to go to college and how she would, study really well and wanted to do well in life, but she had to drop out because of like even more abject poverty in her childhood, because there were 3 children in the family, and my grandparents couldn't afford to take care of them and so on. So my mom would always say, education is what will save you, and this is very much aligned with what Thiruvalluvar says in Tirukkural, that Kalvi, which is education, is the indestructible wealth you can get, and it will continue for a long time, for a lifelong. So make sure you educate yourself, because that's the only lifeline you got. And mom would keep telling us that. And what she wanted to make sure that we break the cycle of poverty in this lifetime with our own hands, and not by depending on others, because we didn't have any support from relatives, friends. Like literally, it was just me, mom, my brother. And my brother and I would go to school, come back from school together. And she taught us to be very independent right from, childhood. Like, I don't know, boiling milk, cooking rice, cleaning the house, taking care of things like doing the dishes, taking the trash out, everything. Because she was working very hard as a nurse at a rural clinic in Coimbatore. And she would often do double shifts and so on. And she wanted to make sure that the two boys in the house knew how to share the responsibilities at home and so on. So we would do all that. And but there was one thing that she instilled always is no debt. So don't take loans. Like basically don't ask anyone for money, right? And two, education. So she was like, her vision was so profound yet extremely simple, right? How she broke it down to two young boys. And but because we didn't have any social security, no financial cushion, no financial security, or even emotional cushion or backup to fall back on, one thing that I would remember is fear. So I would always be very, very scared to attempt anything new. Like the Srini of now, if he were to look at the Srini of the first 20 years, it's unbelievable. Because now I'm all about try new things. I want to do new things. And I understand the why behind the first 20 years of fear, right? Because if you fall, you just fall. There is no parachute, right? Or no cushion. You fall hard and that's it. That's the end of it, right? So I would never take up anything. So I would not play because I had asthma, childhood asthma growing up, because that was the gift from my father. So I wouldn't do sports. I wouldn't try anything different. Like stick to the same path and same rituals every single day, same habits. Predictability, don't try anything new because we have nobody.
Who knows what might happen?
Like, no
if you
money.
break your nose playing cricket, then that's
Don't. I stuck to the safety of routine. I would stick to what I knew. Okay, this worked for me. I'll stick to. Don't deviate at all. Don't take risks. Risk nahi lene ka, And though my curiosity has stayed the same. I'd be curious. I would observe. So I would live a lot of this in my mind. So all these risk taking and adventure, it was all in my mind, but not in reality, right? So even when even going to BITS Pilani was a big miracle, because I still remember that I was thinking about what to do after grade 12, and mom would pull all her gold jewels and everything, put it on the handkerchief and said, "This is all I can gather." Wow. It was not enough even for the first semester. But I don't know, that's like as a turning point in my life. The Tamil Nadu government had a scheme that if you take Tamil as a subject, as a language, and if you score district first rank, the government will sponsor up to, I think, 70%, 75% of your higher education. This was a Karnanidhi government scheme. And I scored the district first in Kanchipuram in my grade 12 exams. And obviously, I immediately qualified for so then we said, okay, let's go. I think I can go to BITS. Then I applied and I got through to BITS Pilani, and the government kept its promise and reimbursed. Otherwise, I wouldn't have managed to go. Yeah. And there was no discrimination about anything. They said, we don't even care about your religion, caste, whatever. You took Tamil as a subject, and I had very good Tamil teachers who were my big inspiration. And I actually wanted to be a Tamil teacher 10 years ago when I was considering moving back to India and work in the social sector. I actually wanted to be a Tamil teacher because I love Tamil so much, and I had very good Tamil teachers. But obviously at that time, it's, again, not a great idea to just jump in without engaging your mind first, right? So I decided to do Teach for India, but eventually I came back to Chennai and established Teach for India here as its founding city director. But that wish to be a Tamil teacher to primary school children still remains. So I think someday I will do that. But coming back to the thing about my first 20 years, I think I just stuck to the safety of routine and all that. And then when I started working after finishing BITS Pilani, things slowly started improving, which I will keep for your next question. But there's one small interesting tidbit I want to say. Like, my handle in social media is Srini091. So some people assume it's my birth year, but actually it's not. 91 was my All India rank at BITS Pilani. For a 17-year-old boy who always grew up in fear, and one more thing I want to add, extremely low in self-confidence. I was doing very well at school, I never had a good self-esteem or confidence that I'm capable of anything at all, because of poverty, because of no support systems, absolutely no support systems. Just my mom, me, and my brother were the world for, and we were there for each other. No money, no appreciation, no recognition. Also, so I grew up thinking I'm capable of nothing. I grew up thinking for a lot till I went to college. Even in college, I would say college was actually worse, because suddenly you're put in the middle of state toppers from across India. So college defeated my confidence even more. I felt like an utter failure in college for 4 years also, but I survived. So 091 was a big thing for me, because, oh, wow, what? I'm like top 100 in India. So, and also too many Srinivasans, in South. So I just kept it as 091 because that was the handle I could get.
No, thank you for sharing that. That seemed like a deeply personal answer. And I actually wanted to ask you about your time at BITS, which I foolishly assumed would be happier. But according to you, it was it really wasn't. But I'm sure you got some positives out of your time over there, or at least you would have learned something either about yourself. I'm not talking about engineering per se, but how was a Srini who graduated from BITS different from the one that entered 4 years prior?
In so many ways, I would say different, and I would say ready with the foundation for the next 10 years, I would say. Like, for a boy who for 18 years, who was never away from his mom,
right?
Who, always in the safety of Pallu, for such a boy to move thousands of kilometers away. I've never been away for even 10 kilometers from my mom entire life. And the first semester was spent in crying, just crying, like physically crying whenever my mom would call. And I'm talking about 1997 when there were no mobile phones, no telephones also. So my hostel had one phone for 200 students that could only receive phones. You cannot call. Thankfully, my mom got my father's job in the telephone, so she could make free STD calls as an employee. So she would tell me, okay, at 7 o'clock, I'll call you. So I'll go and wait there at 6:30, thinking, oh, she may call me anytime and so on. So it was very, very difficult for me the first semester. And I also was involved with a religious group there, who were into this Hare Krishna movement. I was very influenced by them, and I was following, like waking up at 4 o'clock in the Rajasthan winter and going and taking part in the Arati and all that. And I was at an age where I was very influenced by philosophy and following rituals, and almost like the whole concept of what do I call it? Vairagya, as they call it, right? Sacrifice, renunciation, and putting your mind and body through austerity was deeply inspirational for me when in my college years, the first 2 years. And I was at a place where I wouldn't be able to prioritize things. Like, again, the why behind, right? I never, the first 2 years at BITS Pilani, I forgot or overlooked the why am I here, right? I'm here to study and gain a degree. But I struggled with those priorities, and my grades plummeted, my CGPA plummeted, and I was one of the, in my electrical electronics batch, I was one of the lowest So much so that I was put into counseling and all that, and that further damaged my confidence, right? So the first 2 years, I was not into any club, and BITS Pilani has a lot of extracurricular clubs, right? And no one knew me. And even now, a lot of people in my batch, if you say Srini, they're like, no, we don't know who he is. Like, I was not seen in anywhere, like no clubs, no cinema screening, nothing. So I didn't take part in anything for the first 2 years because I was so focused on austerity and chanting and following rituals. And every time I get a break, I would go to Vrindavan, Mathura. I would do the parikrama of Govardhan. I was like living like an ascetic. I would go to Mathura, Vrindavan. And back then, going to Mathura, Vrindavan, I mean, Delhi in 97 is a bit like a UP town now, right? From Pilani to Mathura, I had 6 modes of transport. So a jeep to a certain point, a train, then a bus to Delhi, auto, another bus, a train, and finally that Fatfati, whatever, in from Mathura station to Vrindavan. And I would find free, chowtries to stay in and eat the prasadam that were distributed everywhere. So I was in a very different zone back then. Very different. When my friends were experimenting with weed and alcohol and waiting for the LSR, students to come to Pilani, I would be like in Mathura, Vrindavan. So I'm absolutely not unhappy about those choices because I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about, most importantly, sacrifice, like giving up and deprioritizing myself. Those are the big takeaways I have, and a very high threshold for pain. And by pain, I don't mean the searing kind of but just the numbing, the consistent physical and mental pain is something I consider I have a very high threshold of. Like, I calm down when there is pain. I calm down when there is physical and mental pain or agony, I would say, right? And that has helped me a lot. That helped me a lot in the first job I took up, which is something I never ever imagined in my life, which was in the oil rigs and platforms, which is very difficult physically and mentally and so on. And of course, now in the last 8-9 years, spending a lot of time in the field, in the social sector, in low-income communities, again, I think the threshold for pain has helped me a lot. So, yeah, that kind of summarizes my first 20 years. And I would say a lot of what I am now, what I'm able to do now, my outlook towards life was largely shaped by how I was in the first 20 years, the failures, the low self-esteem, the inability to take risks and so on. But yeah, I'm glad about that journey because that's
my guess is that even though you had in your words a sort of like a difficult first half of your life till now, my guess is that you wouldn't swap that out for anything. You wouldn't swap it out for
not at all. No,
I think that's something that's very clear. So Srini, I actually want to ask you within BITS again.
Deepak, I see them all as stories. I'm a big stories person. I love stories, and I have a lot of stories to share. I have lessons to share with people, and as long as you took away something from those experiences, nothing is lost. Nothing is a failure.
So I want to ask you. So you mentioned that BITS was your turning point, in the sense that getting through to BITS was the turning point.
My third year.
My third year what I was getting to, because it seems that your first 2 years were really just extensions of the life that you were going.
Very rocky.
And so what happened? What changed between second year and third year? And I don't think you're the only person who's had a revelation between the second and third years. That's when I decided, okay, my future is probably going to be writing words and not working with turbines. But for you, I'm assuming the shift was a lot more profound than that. So what happened? What changed?
Between second and third year, again, I mean, very simply, I started asking myself, why am I here? Right? And this feeling, See, again, had I been very well known and my grades dropped, it would have been bad, but nobody knew me. I was a nobody. So it didn't really matter because there was no spotlight, no attention. No one was talking about me, especially the girls. So, it didn't bother me at all. But I asked, so that has been always my superpower is self-realization or self-questioning, self-conversations with myself on resetting my priorities. And to me, that has been my guiding compass needle, right? That not what the society thinks, not what my even parents say or think. It's like, does it make sense to me? Do I believe that this is the right thing for me to do? It has its weak moments also. There are some moments where I also look and reflect and think, shit, am I choosing the easy path? Am I being lazy here? Even now, even the last 1 year, I've thought about it like the imposter syndrome, right? Like, am I doing the right? Am I doing enough? Or is this the right thing to do? Or am I choosing the easy path? Even now, I often think that way. But I think it's okay to think that way because it helps me reflect and say, okay, am I doing okay or not? But between second year and third year, I think, again, asking why am I here? But there was another fear, which is I will be left without a job in campus interviews. People started telling me, look, I mean, with you have nothing to show yourself differently, and your grades are not great, your CGPA is shit. So what are you going to do about it? Some very close friends who cared about me started telling me, and I started thinking about it. Then I detached myself. That is another superpower of mine. I can easily detach. So I detached myself from all the things I was doing for the first 2 years. I was, you won't believe it, in my second year, the group that I was with, they brought these bronze deities from Vrindavan. And they wanted to establish and worship, do all the rituals of deity worship. And stitching clothes, decoration. I was doing that for 1 year because I was curious. I was learning. I still remember there was a Muslim tailor on campus in the marketplace. He would be the one stitching clothes for the our deities that I was worshipping, and he was my good friend. He would come and see how his clothes and the decorations he made were fitting the deities, and also I have some, crazy stories of like doing engineering, but I was doing all this in the morning and morning and evening, right? So I detached. I said, okay, I need to focus on myself now. Otherwise, I'm never getting out of this college with a job. And if I don't get that job, I can never break the cycle of poverty in my life. And my parents, my mom expects me to do this. So, and then I went to the other extreme. I signed up in every possible club I could. Photography club, Pilani Tamil Mandram, Hindi press club, English press club. And I was willing to do what juniors, the first semester students were doing without any ego. So in all these clubs, the people, my juniors were all my seniors in that sense, right? They were like, aren't you a bit like shy or ashamed because this is something that we literally rag people who do this? I'm like, I don't care. I just want to be in this club, learn what we are doing, and I want to catch up on what I missed out in the first 2 years. So when the ego is not there, things become so light and easy. So I was into everything in my third year. So I kind of made up for the first 2 years. And the fourth year, my CGPA improved and so on. And when this company came for recruiting, I just loved their presentation because it was just out in the sea, in the desert and jungles, and not in the office. And why I decided I don't want to work in an office, the internship for 6 months was in Chennai at a software company. Those 6 months were the hardest ever for me because I couldn't imagine that life. I'm very outdoorsy. I'm very hands-on. Even before joining the oil field company, I was very hands-on. So I was like, I can't do this. So when that campus presentation happened, I was like, this is what I want to do. So I think at that point, all that I did in my year 3 and year 4 really helped because I was very hands-on. I was taking part in a lot of events and clubs, and I was doing everything on campus. So I had a lot of stories to share, especially stories of failure, right? So that helped. So my year 3 and 4 were so different from year 1 and 2, but probably year 3 and 4 were different because of my year 1 and 2, and that is the takeaway I always
No, that's
have.
amazing. What a astonishing transformation in some turnaround in some
Turnaround,
sense.
yeah.
And I am currently so curious to ask you about stories from the field, stories from Pilari, but I'm pretty sure we would end up chatting all day. So I'll just wait for you to either put out your own show or compile all of these learnings into a book eventually, which I hope that you have given at least some sort of thought to. So no, this is fascinating. This is
There are 2 books coming out, Deepak, in the next 2 months, but that's not on my life, but it's more about sustainable zero waste living in the urban Indian
and
context.
we will get to those. And I remember you picking me for titles a few months back on those as well. But this is incredible. I've seen so many people, myself, because 4 years in the engineering college in a relatively small town in Kerala can open your eyes up to so much by itself. And from there, I went on to do my master's in what was a fairly cosmopolitan kind of a sort of setup in Ahmedabad. You had people from all over the world, from all over the country who had studied in some of the top colleges and with their own set of egos and their own set of, and as a small sheltered South Indian boy, suddenly being exposed to all sorts of things was in one of the most liberal campuses on the country. It was liberal in all senses. It was truly a culture shock, and I can just imagine what the transformation for you would have been like back in Pilari. Part of me is envious in some sense that you've been through the journey. The other half of me is like, wow, that seems like quite a journey, which I'm glad Srini lived that life to be able to tell the rest of us so that we don't need to go through this. That's fascinating, and it's very clear. It's for those of you who can't. I mean, you're all listening to this. The pride on Srini's face right now, and the amount of stories are just bursting within him. But
let's take another break about here. Yeah, this is going to be a long interview, but hopefully you're enjoying it so far. Let's take a short breather, and we'll be right back.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Paisa Vaisa with Anupam Gupta, Avinash Luthria, advice-only financial planner, and Sebi RII at Fiduciaries address the common mistakes that financial planners make while giving out advice. On Storytellers and Storysellers with Vineet, podcaster Nikesh Murali shares what goes into making a high-quality horror podcast. Learn how micro-meditations can help elevate our work on Smarter with Sid. On our Kannada podcast, Thale Harate, Ganesh and Surya talk to Sandhya Rani, the award-winning writer of Kannada movie Nathi Charamani that's based on female desires and consent. And on Smile India, Shifa Mehta tells us a fascinating story behind India's first female railway announcer. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week on the network, Ciet Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch Kuber, and Intuit India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
And now, back to my interview with Srini Swaminathan, the last segment of this season of Getting Meta. I hope you enjoy it.
I think from there, let's move on to the next phase of your life. When you were working in oil fields and you started teaching, and maybe I should say your giving back phase sort of began over here, 2010 in Dharavi is what you had mentioned. So tell us a little bit about that, and sort of before you do, what prompted this change? Nothing that you had said till now really spoke about, and nothing really pointed to
career and social sector
giving back or anything of that sort. Did you always want to give back, and were you waiting for a time to reach some sort of financial safety before you did, or just did something click one day?
So I've consciously avoided using terms like social service, noble cause, giving back, and other things like that are usually associated with in the social sector, right? Because as I told you earlier, I firmly believe we are all migrants in that sense, and the people that I'm serving I see there is no us versus them. We are all us. I've always believed so. Just economic conditions are different, but our needs are the same. We are all the same people, and it's just support systems. Like I'm just being a support system for, say, the interstate guest workers, right? What is the difference between me and them? They want to work hard, earn money, live a life of dignity and self-respect. How is it different from me?
It's a luck of the draw in many ways, isn't it?
Absolutely. I went all over the world to work. I was a migrant, international migrant and internal migrant also. In one way, when we found the going tough in Coimbatore, my mom, my brother and myself, we packed up and moved to Chennai. I still remember that day on May 1st, 1992, we landed in Chennai Central. And that journey is something it's unforgettable. It's there on Instagram. I've posted about it also. Back then, there was no question of reservation tickets and so on, right? So we just get into it's called the Blue Mountain Express. It starts from Metupalayam and stops in Coimbatore, picks up people and comes to Chennai Central. So we always call it the Blue. So interesting, Blue. So we call it, let's go by the Blue, right? So mom and I, my brother had already come to Chennai. Mom and I took the train, and one unreserved compartment, we got in, we got lost. So mom was in one end, I got pushed to the other end. And you can imagine, like, for a 11-year-old boy, that was so harrowing, right? And it was, even though it was May, Coimbatore is quite chill compared to Chennai. So I had nothing with me, no blankets, nothing. So, and the only place I could sit was in front of the toilet, near the vestibule area. And I luckily found some discarded cardboard boxes. I opened up the cardboard boxes, I put on the floor, and I put some cardboard sheets on myself to protect myself from the cold. And that's my journey from Coimbatore to Chennai. So I saw mom only when we landed. So the whole Chennai Central, that experience, like smelling the Basin Bridge, the Kuam River, then the smell of fish baskets when you reach Chennai Central platform, it immediately takes me back to that night, which was quite an eventful welcome to Chennai Central. So that station has a very strong impression in my heart. But going back to like where it all started, pretty simply, I would say my mother, right? She has always told us stories about her childhood and the poverty, incredible poverty, right? Or abject poverty that she went through, and she survived because of the free midday meal scheme in school. And she would always say that don't be greedy and focus on yourself alone. When you are in a place where you're comfortable, make sure you pay it forward. Do what I did for you, for other children in the country, right? But of course, typical Indian mom, she would say, focus on yourself, like get married, have kids, but also make sure you pay it forward and all that, right? I only picked up the paid forward thing. I skipped the get married part. I was like, I'll save a lot of time, energy, and money if I don't get married or have kids. Not that I'm against marriage or anything, but I'm like, if I stay single. So I think that I kept the flame alive in my heart. That I want to do something for children who are like me and my mother. So what I did in the first 9 years when I was working and earning money and making sure that I buy a house, for example, and build some financial security, I taught myself the basics of personal finance. I learned online, I asked people and so on. And I would start donating money, especially for education, right? Especially for girl children, like paying for school fees, uniform, books. I was donating money regularly. And I think I kept the flame alive of helping people, but with a focus on education. But of course, I was giving for food and other things. But my main focus was education, school children and so on, because that's what I could relate to strongly. And I could also see, like, I was reflecting, like, how could someone like me end up in Venezuela or work in Australia or travel to so many countries and work in an extremely demanding job, like working in the oil field as a field engineer. And my job was like about recording the data of the Earth's substructure. Very fascinating. It's compared to the space. in terms of the high tech things employed. And at the age of 21, 22, I was generating $1 million invoices for my company. Solely myself and my 2 or 3 crew members, but I was the main person. I was the engineer assigned, and that's how oil field works. Like you are given a set of tools, you're given a client, a rig, a crew, go. You are a unit. You are a revenue generating unit. And back then, I'm talking about 2001 to 4, 5. No internet, no phone calls, just a VHF radio. You cannot call your boss unless it's catastrophic. And we had something called an Inmarsat phone, a marine satellite phone, which would cost $3-4 per 30 seconds or something. So, and you had to pay for it. So that is something I'm very grateful for now, because I became extremely self-dependent. And of course, very good with backward planning for emergencies, planning for disasters, and so on. So that was the life I lived in the first 9 years of my 20s. And I kept the flame of Seva alive in my heart. And increasingly also, as I was touching 30, I was being unhappy about, okay, what is this all about? Everyone was pushing me to go to Harvard. Oh, you have so many stories. And every other friend of mine in my job in the oil field was going to MBA, US or UK, that's it, or INSEAD. Every other person, after spending 3-4 years in the oil field, people get frustrated with the job because it's physically very tough, mentally very tough. You're always covered in grease and mud, and you're always also offshore or in the desert or a jungle, and you don't really have a normal life. So I would ask, is this MBA for me? So again, why MBA? I could not convince myself the reason to do an MBA. Very much similar to why should I get married? If I am not convinced deeply, I won't. But if I'm convinced, I'll do it. So I was not convinced about MBA. So I was like, this is not what I want to do. It doesn't appeal to me at all. But I still took the GMAT. I still went through the application process, which was good because that process gave me even more clarity why I shouldn't do it.
Should not. That's amazing. Like, I wish there were this level of clarity for many people who actually do end up doing an MBA. Actually, there's like there are many people who go into it just because that's the done thing, and they end up with they may end up with a decent pay package at the end of it, but
it didn't appeal to me at all. But increasingly, what appealed to me was the I want to be a Tamil teacher in a school. Not for the romance of the idea, but because I have been told repeatedly, oh, you love to break down things. You are very good at telling stories. You are good at explaining things and so on. I was like, okay, so that's why I also became a training and development manager. I had about engineers from 40 countries under me, the junior engineers, right? The first 6 months of their career. So explaining complex technical topics to them and focusing on safety. So oil field work is like it's a lot of things coming together. It's technical knowledge, it's practical knowledge, finance, safety, and so on. So that's when this desire to become a teacher started taking root in me. And I was confused though, is that the right thing to do? Also, I was when I decided to leave and come back to India, I was the head of service quality for 3 countries, Australia, New Zealand, and Papua New Guinea. And so, you always have this doubt, leaving that and going back to India with no job in hand, but with a vague idea, I want to be a teacher. Could it be like completely like career suicide? So do I do this or not? So, here at least I can become a director and grow, and why can't I continue to do this and also donate money like I've always done? But once I convinced that no, this is something I want to do as I turn 30, and I've never celebrated my birthday, not even once in my life. So especially the last 10-11 years, nobody knows, and I go into a cave, switch off everything, not a real cave, but digital, like I switch off everything, and I go somewhere and spend 2 days in like absolutely just with myself and nature, whatever. Like usually it's Auroville. And when I was turning 30 is when I again reflected and said, how do I want my next 10 years to be? And that has helped me greatly, right? I started this exercise in my 20s, like thinking for the next 10 years and so on. So what the decisions I took when I was turning 30 have greatly helped me navigate the last 10 years. And now, as I'm like ending 41, again, the reflections I've had are greatly helping me for the next 10 years. So some backward planning is there. But yeah, moving back to India, joining Teach for India happened because I was, to be very honest, I didn't really have a 10-year plan, Deepak. I thought it was great that Teach for India fellowship came with a 2-year expiry date. I was like, 2 years, I can afford to take this break because I don't have financial dependence. I've built a bit of a safety net. And if someone like me cannot take a break to do something for myself first and the country, who's going to be. So I was influenced by the thought of, I want to do something for my country, for my children in my community. So I came back and gave myself 2 years. And that has largely helped me in the last 10 years. So I give everything, I start with an expiry date in mind. And then like a Netflix subscription, right? You are like, okay, subscription. Now, okay, I'll resubscribe. So that's how I also became a freelancer about a few years ago. Like, okay, I'll give myself 3 years of freelancer life. Works out, I'll continue. If not, I can go back to a job.
Yeah. So there are so many lessons over there hidden in the context of your story. But I was just about to ask you actually, the situation that you lined out is something that a lot of people listening to this might actually be in. Maybe not in the exact situation where they are. Like, hey, I'm doing decently in this one career over here. Do I give it all up and go and do something else? It may not be something as drastic as going from where you were to what you wanted to do. But even if it's just changing a different career tack or trying something else or something. But so two things that really stood out for me. One is that planning sort of like 10 years ahead, have a reasonable idea. And the second thing is that I think that the expiry date experiment that you said, okay, here are 2 years, let's see what happens. And I think that's a great way of thinking. But I would add a third to that. I'm just curious to know whether it's something that you thought about as well. Is plan for the worst case scenario. Many times we are scared to do something, be it small things or even big things like career shifts, because we're like, oh, what if this ends up becoming a failure? Then put yourself in the shoes of what that failure could look like. And then you see that one is not too bad. My guess for you would have been, if you went through this exercise, okay, 2 years I taught, suppose that didn't work out, I could always come back to the company in Australia or some profile like that. It doesn't turn out to be that bad at all.
And here I want to quote one Kabir Doha that has always resonated with me a lot, which is like, Kaal kare so aaj kare so ab, pal mein pralay hoegi, bahuri karoge kab. Which is basically, do what you want to do now. Like tomorrow could be a pandemic or a disaster or pralay. Don't postpone things. He says like what Martin Luther King Jr. said, like the time is always right to do what is the right thing to do, right? So these things have driven me a lot, but also along with, if you had to plot XY axis, my fear. So as I told you, right, fear has always dominated the fear of trying to something new and so on. So that bhai is something that has always stayed with me. But as I gained confidence, as I started planning, and I started losing the fear when I started doing things and saw that, it's not as bad as I thought it was. In fact, my first ever tattoo was about do not fear. That's in Sanskrit. It's like 2 words from the Gita, 18th chapter, which is like do not fear, or more like face your fear, right? And I got it done about 8 years ago when I was getting better at managing and facing my fears, right? So
what else did you do to manage your fears? I think that's a great point, especially for somebody who's in their 20s, 30s, trying to figure out what they sort of want to do. Like, what are the other things that you asked yourself, or any other techniques really, or is it just a matter of just forgetting everything and just jumping right into it? And any situations, any examples at all?
So I think one of the big killers of fear is success itself, right? Is I would say, okay, more than success, it's action. I have noticed that
Right.
I'll be in fear about doing something, but when I engage my mind first and then engage my limbs next,
Yeah.
and the third point is exactly what I was actually coming to, that is what in the oil field we technically call as a HARC, which is hazard analysis and risk control, which you called as like preparing for the failure. I mean, preparing to face the failure risks, right? So basically you're thinking what could be the worst. And we have a culture saying ashubh mat bolo, no, shubh shubh bolo.
Exactly.
I cannot stand it because in oil field, oil field is a bit like the army, right? You are actually, every day when you wake up, you are ready for death. And I've had a ton of near-death experiences. We should probably do another podcast for that. But I recently talked about it in one of the fundraising sessions also. Like, I spoke about 4 big near-death experiences in my 20s. One in Sudan, one in Egypt, one in South China Sea, and one in Bombay High over in my 20s. So quite different. Like the teen Srini would have never imagined the Srini in my 20s, right? Like, so oil field prepares you, like you wake up and you are ready for near death or even death experiences of yourself or people around you. So we prepare for the worst. On paper, you are supposed to think and write what could be the worst that could go wrong. And obviously the worst in oil field is loss of life. But the classification were to be like near miss, light failure, and then serious failure, catastrophic, multi-catastrophic. Any failure, lost time or injury were classified. There were like very detailed classification. Suppose an equipment failed. You can't just say a report, oh, this equipment failed. That failure had to be classified. Okay, this was in the company I worked in, Schlumberger. They had extensive classification to find out the near immediate cause and then root cause. Because you never know. Failure is a great opportunity to learn, get to the root of the problem. And the product centers would be alerted saying it's all because of this one screw or one O-ring, which failed at a temperature. So you have to reproduce those failures. So failures, like after happening once, the agony of reproducing those failures was even more. So if an equipment failed in the rig, I had to bring it back to town and I had to reproduce those failures. So naturally you lose the fear, right? So coming back to your point about preparing for the worst, before undertaking any activity, I had to prepare a HARC analysis. What's the worst that can happen? The engineer could die. And I'm not joking. At the age of 21, I was trained to be a certified explosives handler, certified radioactive source engineer, and certified to work with pressure. Pressure, I'm talking about 30,000, 40,000 PSI. To give a comparison to the listeners, we know the car runs on 30 PSI pressure. Cycles like road bikes around 150, 140 PSI. And we are talking about 30, 40,000 PSI pressure. On top of it, working at heights, working in the middle of a sea, where you could have cyclone, storms, whatever, and working away from civilization. Oh, for someone in the 20s, like not seeing any women for 3 months was hard. or not going and having a beer or going even to a cafe was all luxury, right? There was nothing. So working with all these risks, handling explosives, detonators, radioactive sources like americium, beryllium, cesium-137, which are silent killers, right? You wear a dosimeter and make sure you're not getting doses. The worst thing with all this, you not only kill yourself if you mishandle or don't prepare for failure, you could kill others around you. Like radioactive source, it's not like the fluorescent green that they show in Hollywood movies. The radioactive sources that I handle look like any other steel pellet. I could have dropped it and it could have killed everyone in the rig. To be more precise, it could have killed the WBCs of people in the rig. And everyone would have died, not even knowing what killed them. But imagine, like, at the age of 21, I was trained in all this, and I was also operating, like assembling guns, assembling radioactive sources, and so on. So you had to prepare for failure. You had to think about what could go wrong. And if it goes wrong, how are you going to mitigate the severity? So we had two terms, right? One is likelihood of something happening, and then if it happened, what is the severity? The whole idea was to drastically bring down the severity. So if an accident happens, what's the worst? Oh, loss of life. Can we completely prevent the likelihood of an accident happening? Not really, because there are a lot of things that are beyond your control. But if it happens, how can we bring down the severity? So from death, exactly like what they did with COVID, right? The vaccines reduce the severity of death to fever. So likelihood and severity is something that we always work with. I applied all that in my personal life also.
I was just about to ask you, actually. It looked like all these are...
I brought it back all to my personal life. I was like, yeah, I'm prepared for a failure. I prepare for the worst, but how can I prepare for the worst? And this is where the training helped me, like almost like army training, right? We have a culture in India of putting our limbs, our body in line. We jump into something without stepping back and engaging our mind first, right? And of course, I was conditioned with all that all my life. But thankfully, with the training I got in the oil field, where they teach you to step back first, don't jump in. Step back, analyze with your mind, and look at the risks of failure also, and then make a plan, and then engage your body and mind. So that greatly has helped me, I would say, in the last 10, 20 years. This is why even now, before embarking on big things, Deepak, I am scared. That's very human. I accept it. I am scared, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I have my heart rate going up. But the Srini of the teenage or early 20s would have recognized these palpitations and stepped back or given up, saying, oh, I don't want to do this. But in my 30s and now in my 40s, if I feel palpitations, if I feel my heartbeat going up, if I feel nervous and scared, that's precisely why I'll take up something.
It's that last bit was astonishing to listen to, and for listeners who can't see, Srini does not look like he is in his 40s with me. Absolutely assure you. So whatever you're doing seems to be working. So let's talk about one of those things actually, that one of those adventures, if I may, which is the and obviously as a cyclist, this is something that that had my jaw on the floor, which is the Kashmir to Kanyakumari cycling. Tell me about that. What prompted it? How you prepared? So many of the dots are already connected right now. Your experience and the lessons that you learned over here, what you said right now, obviously translate into something like this. Did you? And as a sub question to that, did you then decide to go all out and do huge adventurous tent pole like things like this, or did you just also prep with the or did you not have your sights on something like crisscrossing the country and just said, okay, let's just do this a few steps at a time, and then I'm just curious about the whole thing really. Did you aim for the big thing? Did you always have those in mind?
So I caught a phrase that you just said, shifting goalposts, right? I really like that phrase that you mentioned. I don't use that much, but I live that a lot. How? When I started running in 2009-10, because I wanted to work on my asthma, right? That was the time when I've always lived with my inhaler, and that was the time when I started thinking about my next 10 years, right? And a lot of my college friends had been married with kids, and we would share pictures, and I would look at them and feel like, God, this person has changed so much. And a couple of them even had their first heart attacks in 30s. And I looked at it and I felt, oh God, I already have asthma, and I don't want to get other issues also, and I want to do something about it. When I turn 40, 50, I want to live comfortably in my body and enjoy the fruits of my labor. Like the 10 years of my life, I survived many near-death experiences. I worked so hard, physically especially. Like I would call from the rig and cry to my mom, I don't want to do this job anymore. Mom, it's very, very hard. Mom would, typical Indian mom, she would say, chup, bite your teeth, bite your lips and work hard. I was working harder than you and earning probably 1/100th of what you're earning. At least you're getting paid for your hard work. So she would say, do your best, bite your teeth and tolerate and work hard. Don't give up. Don't give up easily. Unless it's life threatening, let me know. But otherwise, work hard. This is how it is. Take it from me. You have to work hard. Because I worked hard, night shifts and all that, I could send you to school. If you want your next 20 years to be comfortable, put in that effort now. It could probably be only for 4 or 5 years, but you will. And that was very, very golden words, actually, like makes sense. So coming back to this point about goalposts and all that, like I would say, I wanted to start running. And when I started running, I never thought I'll run a marathon in my lifetime ever. I'm talking about one marathon also. Because, running and asthma never goes. So at that time, I would just look at the lamppost ahead of me and I'll say, okay, I'll run till that lamppost. Or, I'll run 3 lampposts. And that's how I started running, cover that. Or looking at something like a tree or a building, I would run till that. And I feel like, okay, I can run more and more. So literally shifting goalposts in a short sense. Then I did my first 5K. I was ecstatic, like unbelievably ecstatic. And then I did my first 10K. I couldn't believe that someone could do that, like with me, my lung capacity. Then I did my first half marathon in Chennai. Then my first marathon in 2011 in Mumbai. Then, I kept doing it. Same thing with cycling, Deepak. With cycling, I have a childhood connection. Cycling is something I picked up as a child. They say in Tamil, korangapidi. So because I was not tall enough to ride the normal dudwala bike, I would put my leg through the frame and cycle like a monkey, It's very funny to look at, but it was called it's still called the korangapidi in Tamil, because if you're not tall enough, you put your leg through the frame and cycle like that. Yeah. I started doing that. Then when I grew a bit tall, I could ride the normal cycle. And, I want to slightly digress here and say water is always intricately connected to low-income communities' everyday struggle. Be it Chennai, be it Mumbai, Coimbatore, wherever, when you're in poverty, you always struggle with like access to clean drinking water. So because my mom used to work in the hospital or wherever, bringing water for home was a responsibility that fell on me and my brother. And those colorful plastic pots we would put in the back of the cycle. Right. And I would cycle, fill up water, bring back home, fill it up, and I would do sorties like that. In my in my teens, or even before I became a teenager. I never knew that, that confidence and experience would probably, help me much later or retain my love for cycling. So I was doing it even when I was at BITS Pilani, and even when I was working in Egypt or Venezuela. When I would come home for vacation, I would be going and fetching water in my cycle. Yeah, but I enjoyed it because I was like, I get to cycle. And, I'm bringing water for home. So I would do all that. And I retained my love for cycling more as just commute, right? Even in college, I had a cycle just to go around. Never ever thought about long distance cycling. So when I was living and working in Australia, New Zealand, which is great for cycling, or Malaysia, somehow I didn't get into cycling back then. I would come back to India, and in 2008-9, the cycling scene was picking up in Chennai. Chennai, is where it all started in one way in Tamil Nadu, right? People would do leisure cycling, and it was slowly picking up. And you could buy cycling jersey and gloves via eBay. And we started cycling, and suddenly there was a discussion about, we'll cycle to Mahabalipuram, which is 50 kilometers. Back then, I'm talking about 2009, I could not believe it. I thought, impossible. 50 kilometers? No way in my life. In my life, I can't do that. But again, I told you, right? Something scares me. Something makes my heartbeat go up. Something makes me feel nervous. I'm like, I want to do this. What's the worst that can happen? I'll give up at 20 kilometers. But I still did 20. I'll come
Yeah.
back with better understanding of my mind and body. That thought is very
Right.
exciting for me. Anything that helps me push the goalpost of understanding my body and self and my thresholds, I want to get into that because it pushes me.
That's wonderful, and I'm sure you'll talk about the Kanyakumari thing a little bit right now. But I think you have a beautiful addendum there to what we just said before. It's not just about preparing for the worst case scenario, but also Sora, and this is probably just two engineers talking.
Thresholds.
This is sort of like, it's not about the threshold. It's about, okay, what am I going to take away from this? Even if I fail at 1 kilometer, 10 kilometer, 20 kilometers, I have now a better understanding of myself, cycling, my love for cycling beyond 10, 15 kilometers. Having these sort of, these are the sort of like metrics or the takeaways that I'm going to have at the end of this, I think becomes even more important. And you can say this for anything, be it a cycling trip to Mahabalipuram, be it a change in career, be it something that you want to try, be it new music that you want to try, absolutely anything.
It's a bit of a self-torture test, Deepak. In the oil field, we actually had heat chambers, pressure chambers, where we put the electronic tools and take it beyond its stated temperature and pressure and see, does it fail? And we learn by plotting the graph, by monitoring, we see where it fails. And then we understand why it failed and what component was the weak link. I bring it back to my own personal life also.
Yeah, it's almost like life has put us
chambers,
in these various chambers. We get a little philosophical about it, but please, let's come back.
So I started with that, then Mahabalipuram.
And
I finished the Mahabalipuram one. But also, I would say, in preparation for that, I didn't want to be like giving up in the middle. So I started cycling every day. 10, 20, 30. I one day pushed up to 40. Then I felt, look, almost 85% of the distance that I've covered it, which means I think I can do this. Then also recovery. In endurance sports, it's not like what you did on the arena that matters. It's what matters more is how did your mind and body recover after that torture. So, marathon runners will always say that, how was your recovery? Yeah. If it took you a long time, then it means that, you got lucky, but you still need to put in that training, right? So we did Mahabalipuram. Then one day we decided to do Pondicherry. This was in 2010. So we did an overnight cycling to Pondicherry.
Wow. Okay.
And that was a big thing for me. I couldn't believe that with my lungs and all that, I could actually push myself all the way to Pondicherry. Then we started doing regular long distance rides like that, like anything more than 50 kilometers. And then I moved to Bombay. So I took my cycle with me to Bombay. And in Bombay, it was a very different scene. Suddenly, cycling became my escape from the difficulties of living in Bombay at a salary of 12,000 rupees and teaching the entire day. Teach for India Fellowship is extremely demanding, like on your mind, your body and all that. And I wanted to live those 2 years within my salary as a teacher. I didn't want to dip into my savings. So I lived within the salary that Teach for India was giving me. And it was very, very hard for me. On top of, am I doing the right thing? Should I have continued my job and donated money instead? All those things. Okay, what after 2 years? And so on. So often when it gets too much, I would just get on my cycle and like from Kurla to Panvel and back. That was 100 kilometers. Or I would just go till Vashi and come back. So I was doing these long distance rides more as a way to escape. And when I do long distance running or cycling, all my blues, my depression, my worries and negativity, I actually literally feel that flying away from my body. So purely to escape from my worries and fear and anxiety, I started cycling long distances in Bombay as well. Same with running, but I prefer cycling over running. It takes me long. It's the closest I get to flying. And I'm not a very super fast cyclist or anything. I enjoy the journey. So I kept in touch with cycling even after coming back to Chennai, just regularly doing, I started doing brevet rides, which is the randonneuring, right? 200, 300, 400 and so on. I started doing them. That's when in 2000, so I built a community of people, in Chennai. I was part of the inaugural team of members who started the phenomenally popular and successful Tamil Nadu Cycling Club. back then it was just Chennai bikers at googlegroups.com. Then we decided in 2010 to formally establish us as a non-profit and as a trust and promote cycling in Tamil Nadu. So every December they organize this tour of Tamil Nadu cycling in collaboration with the government and tourism and so on. So I started taking part in all those and all that, and regularly kept long distance cycling for health, fitness, health, and I hardly use my inhaler in the last 10 years. Very rarely. It's there with me always, but I rarely use it because of cycling. So every December we do this tour of Tamil Nadu and cycling picked up. That's when in 2016, the core group of cyclists, we all were thinking about we should do something big, something that scares us. Oh, Kashmir, Kanyakumari. We initially thought of going from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, starting in Tamil Nadu, ending in Kashmir. But then when we did the research, we found that the reverse would be better because of weather and everything. And Rotary Club of Madras Midtown, they were willing to sponsor it. They were willing, they said, okay, we want to do this as the 100th year of Rotary Foundation, and we will take care of the permission. We will take care of, like Isuzu was a sponsor. So many sponsors came together and said, okay, you all just cycle, we'll take care of all that. And they use that to raise funds for Swachh Bharat, to implement hygiene facilities in schools in Tamil Nadu. So we said, okay, so it was 33 days, nearly 5,000 kilometers, and it was not a straight line. So we went through different states because TI Cycles was one of the sponsors. So they organized the events, and Rotary wanted to touch certain Rotary districts and so on. So to be honest, it was very scary for me because the route map was like you wake up, cycle 12 hours, sleep. Wake up, cycle 12 hours, sleep. And on an average, we did about 170, 180 kilometers every day. So, and for like 8-9 days, 1 day rest to repair everything. Again, 8-9 days, 1 day rest. So, and this was mostly through highways and ghat roads and so on. So, highways are built more for trucks and heavy vehicles, not for cycles. Not at all, but I took it 1 day at a time. Or to be honest, when we started in Jammu, I said, let's get to Delhi. I didn't even think about Kanyakumari. Again, shifting goalposts, right? If I reach Delhi, I'm happy. Then when we got to Delhi, then I said, if I reach Udaipur, that's all, like, I'm happy. I did 25%. Then Udaipur, I started getting the confidence. I think I'll reach Bombay for sure. So again, in my mind, shifting the goalposts, and while cycling, I would look at the plan for the day and think, oh, okay, I want to reach this village at 60 kilometers. So one by one, I reached, we all reached Kanyakumari, and that was unbelievable because more than the body, it was all about the mind because, cycling 10-12 hours every single day for 30 days is immensely draining on the mind. Like there were times I had highway fatigue. I was hallucinating because there were no trucks and I would see trucks. There were no flyovers and I would feel, oh, I'm riding on a flyover and so on. But that whole month was incredible because who would have imagined you could cycle on a road bike from Kashmir to Kanyakumari? Mountain bike, I understand, which means Indian roads have gotten much better that you could cycle from Kashmir to Kanyakumari.
Yeah, so that's so astonishing. Like I had a dream of cycling from Bombay to Goa once, which unfortunately had to get cancelled for a few for reasons beyond my control, and not because of laziness. I just a couple of other things, but this is astonishing. The fact that you actually managed to do this, and this too not so long after you actually just properly got back into cycling, which sort of like shows that a little bit of determination in the right circle. Any sort of unsurmountable looking dream is impossible. So I mean, just to wrap up on that particular bit. Sure, it seems like a huge headline now to say, wow, I cycled all the way from the north to south of the country. went through so many different terrains and all that. But while you were doing it, it didn't seem like it was that big of a task. Like like when you yourself look back on something like that right now, does it seem like this huge mountain that you somehow miraculously conquered, or do you see it as, I mean, that was a challenge, but I managed to break it down into so many different things. And if a similar challenge in a completely different space that you're not maybe comfortable with right now were to come up, you probably have the confidence or know how to go about tackling it.
I often say this. I feel this, say this, and sometimes people mistake me for, oh, you're fishing for compliments. And I tell them, not really. I actually do not feel like, even the COVID soldier thing, the COVID serving 2 lakh people with food and raising 500 crore, or the Kashmir, Kanyakumari, or Gujarat, Assam cycling, I actually do not, even in my mind, genuinely think it's a big deal. That's why I get very shy and embarrassed when people are like, oh, you're a hero, you are. I'm like, honestly, in my mind, I do not give myself that trophy or medal, right? Mm-hmm. Same with marathons. People are like, whoa, you did so many. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, it's over 10 years. I kind of play it down because honestly, even now, I do not think it's a big deal. I've tried analyzing that. Partly that also goes to a bit of, low self-confidence, that what's a big deal in this? Going back to my childhood or my teen, like nothing. Oh, I'm just. I often say I'm a nobody. I'm just an ordinary person, whatever. Which people sometimes mistake it as, oh, you're fishing for compliments. I'm like, not really. I actually do not need compliments. I just give myself a lot of compliments. Okay. Because a marathon runner,
that's immense.
I give a lot of pat on the back and keep going. Because that's how my life has been. Like, I often do not crave for get recognition, or I don't even think about getting. No, I don't seek it at all. Mm-hmm. I do share for to share stories, but not for validation. I've always been because I told you, right, in my 20s when I worked in the oil field, I pulled off incredible miracles. Saved an entire rig from going into the water. Saved wells from blowing out. Saved people. Saved myself. And
these are facts. These are facts. It's not you boasting right now. This is just this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I couldn't imagine generating $1 million invoices working somewhere remote where I wouldn't even get proper food to eat because I'm vegetarian. So I don't give I just tell myself, you did a good job and just keep going. Right? I'm just proud of myself. So I don't seek external validation in that sense. So
I mean, that's such a zen space to sort of.
You know what they say, Deepak, right? When you're very deeply self-content and you feel fulfilled to the core, you cannot be controlled.
That's beautiful. That's such a beautiful thing, especially in this day and age when we seek validation. Platforms are trying to get us to share more and more to get that a bit of validation. I think that little bit of internal self-reflection and I think all that is absolutely.
That's why I was shocked when the United Nations chose me as this Bharat Ke Mahavir thing, or Better India people nominated me. I was like, no, I mean, so many people are doing it. Like, aisa kya kar diya maine? Like, what have I done? Mm-hmm. I played a bridge, I played a facilitator role, but I am also part of this whole machinery. Like, there were donors, contributors, the food vendors, tea vendor. I'm one of them. So I always say, I'm accepting this on behalf of everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that whole standing on the shoulders.
Exactly. It's a human chain. I call it a human chain, right? Like, I'm also part of this. But we're all in this together.
Like I think it was Tim Urban who said that when Gutenberg created the printing press, 95% of the printing press was technically already there.
Put it together.
Last 5% to put everything together. I think that's fascinating. And I think it's a question that's particularly pertinent for right now, where there's so much negativity from all corners, right? Be it COVID related, political, or everything else. You can't go online Twitter these days without feeling without feeling a little helpless and all that. Is one of the major reasons I haven't been logging onto Twitter for a long time over the last few months or so.
But Deepak, you can't escape the Twitter screenshot on Instagram.
That's true. But but thankfully those end up being funny memes or the part of Twitter that I don't that I actually do miss. Actually, it's less rabble rousing,
outrage,
and all that. So yeah, coming to you, you certainly wouldn't be doing so much if you weren't a little optimistic or a little positive about at least a little bit about what the future holds, be it for communities, for the country, or even for humanity as a whole. So my simple question really is, how do you stay positive, Srini? Like, I'm assuming that you've been through a lot of on-ground stories that have just either changed the way you think or motivated you. But yeah, my simple question to you is, how do you stay positive at a time like this?
It is very, very difficult, I would say, when all you see is gloom, and not just because of COVID. Like, for example, climate change, right? And and our politics of hate in this country, and where leaders are supposed to alleviate pain and misery, they're actually the ones generating it, and and all for selfish political gains and so on. And that's been even worse in the last few years, I would say. But I have a firm belief that love beats gloom. Love for humanity, love for human values, and care for each other, especially in these times, is the need of the hour, right? So I seek refuge or solace in stories of hope and love, and making sure that we remind each other. But to be honest, I have my days of anxiety. And when, I am a person with always likes dust on my body, on my hand, and I like to put my body in the line, right? That's why I refuse to sit and work in an office. I mean, not really complaining about or putting down people who choose that life, but I just know it's not for me. I want to be in the field, even in the social sector, right?
Yeah.
And that also means I see a lot of anxiety, I see a lot of pain, misery, struggles, and often people come to me looking at me as a savior. And I tell people that not really, we save ourselves. Like, we all can work on ourselves. We have all worked together. But what that means is I see and experience and feel it's not it's not possible not to stay away and detached. All this lotus leaf water drop and all is like great, but when you're in the field day in and day out, when you see misery and struggle, it's very difficult to detach. You will feel, and my theory is let feel, let yourself feel. Let yourself feel anxious, but know when to detach, pull back, and take your time off to analyze it practically and rationally, with kindness and empathy, of course, because and that's been my philosophy. Yes, there is a lot of gloom, misery, struggle, but when has humanity not ever had a period of gloom, struggle, misery, and so on, right? But that's when I would say grass and the forest, right? Like zooming, it's very important to periodically zoom out and I take refuge in numbers. I love infographics. I love metrics, M&E as they call it, monitoring and evaluation. But also not losing focus of the emotional, not losing focus on basic human values. How people feel is as important as what does the data say. And a balance is very important, right? So I take refuge in all this. And also see, okay, is the negativity even justified? It is a bit like Chennai weather, right? Oh, it's only 35, but man, it feels like 46. So both arguments are valid. So I mean, to TLDR, to your answer, the question is, how do I stay positive? I have my own coping mechanisms. I have my life jacket. I have my lifeboat. I have built these self-rescue systems over time. I recognize myself dripping or dwindling into, descending into the blues. I catch myself drained and anxious. And I have built my own coping mechanisms to rescue myself.
Wonderful.
Right. And that is very important for every individual, I would feel. But it's okay to feel anxious and negative. It's okay to feel hopeless. But what's not okay is to stay there and not do anything about it.
Yeah, no, that's so well put. And I think if nothing else, I think that your superpower is maintaining that balance between deep empathy and dissociated perspective. Almost, letting yourself be completely vulnerable and emotional when the time calls for it, but at the same time being able to switch on that switch and say, okay, this is to analyze that situation. As it were, very often.
Deepak, I have one more point. Just to add on to that, like I have these two things, right? Locus of concern and locus of control. When I analyze my past failures or past issues of feeling negative and overwhelmed, I've noticed that I have too many circles of locus of concern, which I continuously try to make it into my control. Right. One thing that I've learned over time is to reduce my locus of concern. One, like not have too many, and stop trying to convert every locus of concern into locus of control. There are things I've said, I'm sorry, I'm helpless, I can't do this. I'll only take up things which I feel like capable of, or I feel like I can do something. Like the locus of concern for migrant workers became something that I could work on and control. So knowing to say no also it's an act of self-preservation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, by the way, is great freelancing advice as well. There are some things you're concerned about, so you can control. Honestly, it's been a great long conversation. But last question now that I want to ask you, and this is really for you to to help any listeners who might be interested sort of in, I know you don't like the phrase, but I'm going to use it in giving back in some way or the other. So not everyone might be willing to commit a career or even a substantial portion of their time or money in giving back that you do. But I do believe that everybody, especially those who might be listening to something like that, and definitely who stayed this long, wants to be able to help back in some small way or the other. And I, for one, definitely believe that every small bit, even if it's 1 day or 10 rupees, helps. So what I want to ask really is, what are the various levels that you think that people could possibly help at? What are the various levels at which people can help anything, whether it's their communities or be a cause, or whether it's just blindly donating to something or the other, whatever it is.
See, I firmly believe contribution is not just monetary, or monetary contribution is not the only contribution or donation that you can do to say, I care for my community, I care for my country, right? Your contribution can be in so many ways, as simple as, for example, amplifying a cause that you believe in, supporting someone. It could just even mean just retweeting or quote tweeting or screenshot and share saying, I think this person is doing a good job. Because as much self-content and self-validating I am, I also delight in and feel good when the community I live in appreciates, or even before appreciating, notices me, gives me attention, right? I thrive in it. I'm human. So I don't need awards, but the people I consider as my connections, if they notice, that itself says they have not muted me, and they are like appreciating it. Like see, what you're doing now is a great contribution, because you're given your time to take an interest in how do I do what I do, or why I do what I do, and then now you're amplifying it for people, right? To me, this is great contribution also. So it need not be always monetary. Last year, people cooked extra food and gave it to me. I picked it up. People bought bread and just gave it to me. So it could be in kind. Like I've been doing a series of events in the last 1 month to raise awareness and funds. And so many people gave their time, in those Zoom events. Some people did performances and so on. So I would say traditional notions of social service and giving back to the community are and have been changing in India over the last 10 years. So we should move away from just monetary contribution, donations, and so on, and think differently. And that is what appeals to me a lot. We all can do something to using the power, especially using the power of social media, the followers, right? I mean, I have only 5,000-6,000 followers, but what I've managed to do in collaboration with everyone wouldn't have been possible if so many people didn't share and amplify. By the way, Deepak, in the last 1 year, I've never asked anyone like an influencer, celebrity, people with high follower count, hey, thoda share karna. No, I put it out publicly saying, I would appreciate if you retweet this or help. But I never go after someone because they have a high follower count and ask, hey, thoda share karna, amplify karna. No. Or I do not ask a high net worth individual, can you donate? I believe that put out those stories, when people see the authenticity of it, they will become self-appointed ambassadors. So to answer your question, TLDR is, please do not look at giving back purely as money. It could be your expertise, time, it could be your follower count, the reach you have on social media, or your degrees of separation with people who are big influencers, right? Sometimes, recently I asked, Ashwin Ravi's wife, who is my friend Preeti, I've known her for 5 years now. I requested if she can share, if she and Ashwin can share one of the fundraiser posts, and they did it. And look at the amplification it got in one post, right? They were very kind to do that. So, giving back can be in so many ways. But when the flame is alive inside you, by doing these small acts of giving back, you never know, it may lead to something where you feel like this is something I want to do a little bit more, which is what led me to become a primary school teacher in Mumbai, right? So doing these acts of giving back will keep the flame alive in us. And I think in an age which is increasingly smart, intelligent, with more money and resources, I think being kind is the ultimate richness, I would say.
Wow, I can't think of a better way to sort of end this. I don't think there'll be anything more profound that either of us could say to top that. Srini, that's about it. I'm pretty sure that we could end up. We have not just covered everything, but we could go on talking for another 3 hours if we didn't have other things to do with our lives as well. And hopefully we will do a round 2 of this. Sometime later, because with each of these themes that we spoke about, I'm not satisfied. I actually want to dig more about how you survived. There are so many themes that we could think about, like how to survive a tough time in either college or a tough job. There is so much that we could speak about over there on just that topic alone. And I've just scratched the surface of your athletic abilities, as it were. And there's so much, and hopefully this is just a trailer of what is to come, even though it's a pretty long trailer by itself.
I didn't really prepare about the life hack, productivity hack, mental models. I didn't really think and prepare. But I hope that, if I share genuinely, you will be able to pick and edit and. And
that's the idea. That's the idea, because one thing I've realized over these conversations is that not everybody, has, this is the exact mental model that I follow, and I have this 2x4 matrix which I've pasted on my wall. It's really from the stories. It's really from your own observations that you draw up things and say, oh, this is your way of looking at the world, a balance of this and this is what's needed. These are the kind of questions that I need to ask myself in my 20s and 30s. So I can plan the next 10 years or whatever to the head. So that's really I've always said that this show is not for those who are looking to
shortcuts or hacks. See, I follow the usual writing down things, post-it notes, and planning on Google Calendar, sheets, and all that. I am a big believer in all that. I mean, but those are things you can find online. I mean,
on anywhere. And what I've realized is that for more meaningful insights, you really need to. It can't be given in listicle. You need to sit through the 1 hour interview in order to get the context of that and the and all that. So I think that's a great way to sort of wrap this up. So Srini, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything that you do. You have acted as an inspiration for so many people, and I'm sure in many ways your journey is just sort of starting. And I look forward to seeing what the next 10 years for you. Now that you've been through this, you had that discussion with yourself. is going to pan out. And absolutely. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they?
Social media, like just Google my name or find me on Twitter, Instagram. They can DM me, and I'm happy to share my email also. But I think Twitter, Instagram is the best way to get in touch with me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Those links will be in the notes. You had mentioned a couple of books coming out. Would you like to talk about them?
Yeah, these are I've also been on a sustainable, living journey over the last, I would say, 7-8 years, when I actually kickstarted this volunteer cleanup initiative in Chennai. We would go as a group of volunteers, clean up the city, and that's when I realized, oh God, I am personally responsible for generating so much waste. So I've been on this journey of mindful living where I consciously reduce the waste I generate. Forget about dealing with it afterwards. But how can I reduce the waste I generate in the first place? So I've been living this journey. I share a lot about it. So one of the publishers from Delhi, Hachette, they asked if I can put it in a book. I said, well, that scares me because writing is not my forte at all. I'm very clear about it. I can talk, I can present, speak on a stage, no fear at all, but I'm not so good with writing. They said, don't worry about it. Just put whatever you can think of and we will take care of the rest. So I've been working on it for 1.5 years now. And the book is going to be released very soon. So it's called Imperfectly Zero Waste, a no-nonsense guide to living sustainably in India. So it's very India focused and brings together a lot of tips and hacks to live a less low waste life in India. So I'm very excited about people reading that book and following some of the tips that we mentioned there. Yeah. But the cornerstone of that book is empathy. Again, it's not about guilt tripping, making people feel shameful about it. No, do what you can, start where you can, one step at a time, and most importantly, be kind to yourself and others as you get started on this journey to be kind on the world.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Srini, for your time. And I think that's a great way to end this actually season of Getting Meta, as it were.
Wow. Now, how was that for a finale? Guys, I'm telling you, I could have honestly gone on talking to Srini for another couple of hours, and I think he could still do an entire podcast just on his own about lessons from his life. But he is way too modest for all that. So, what are my takeaways from this, the final episode of this season of Getting Meta? So many things. I've put together 5 for you. One is having immense self-realization and the ability to reset priorities. He started the show saying that, and he also referenced it right towards the end when he spoke about zooming out to maintain positivity. This whole thing about zooming out is something that many of my other guests have also said in completely different contexts. Like Rohan Joshi spoke about how stepping away from the whole AIB circus just helped him evaluate his life, and Meeta Malhotra also spoke about it in a different context. So that is number one. Number two is a very nice line that he said: when ego is not there, things become easier. So nicely put. Third, if I don't feel my heartbeat going up, I don't get into it. I think that is fantastic. What a simple heuristic that is. I remember a friend of mine, a very sagacious friend of mine, giving me a similar piece of advice when I was considering a career change. And he said, if it doesn't scare you, then it's probably not worth getting into. I think there is definitely something over there. So if I don't feel my heartbeat going up, I don't get into it. Very nice. Fourth, planning for worst case scenarios. Think about what the worst case scenario could be, prepare for it, and also what could the potential takeaways be from that. I think that's a nice thing that also a lot of my other guests have spoken about. And finally, I want to end with this. This is so nice and just puts our place in the universe and in this country and indeed the world in context. I believe we are all migrants. Beautiful, just beautiful. And well, that is it for the first season of Getting Meta, formally. I absolutely enjoyed putting these 10 episodes together, and I hope you like them. Well, you've stayed till the end, so I'm guessing you did. So what's next? Well, I can definitely promise you there's definitely going to be a second season of the show. Well, you'll probably have to bug me into doing it. And based on how many of you actually harangue me to do it, I'll put it together. But jokes apart, you can expect Getting Meta Season 2 sometime next year. Why next year, you ask? Well, because I have my other show to focus on right now, and that's The Origin of Things, which a lot of you are baying for my blood to get back. So as soon as this is over, I'll start working on season 3 of that. So hopefully that will hit your ears sometime late in 2021 or early 2022. So let's please do stay tuned for that. That being said, I do have a few plans for Getting Meta in the interim. More on that next week once I've managed to actually shore up the plans. So the feed will stay active, so please do not unsubscribe from the show. I will have some surprises for you, and I hope to actually involve you guys, the audience, and build a small community around the show. The basic idea I have is to answer some of your questions from my experience and my experience of speaking with these guys. So let me just shore that up and send it across to you. But my sole request to you right now is tell me what you think about this show, the series, everything. Contrary to popular belief, podcasters are not exactly inundated with fan mail. At least I'm not. I'd love to know what you guys think about the show and what you think and how you think, what do you think we can do in the interim? Why I may not have the ability to record more interviews. I'd love to answer some of your questions and things like that on the show itself. So tell me what you think about that idea. In the meantime, if you don't want to do that, I think the best way you can support the show is to recommend it to a friend. If you really like the show, review on a podcast platform, especially Apple Podcasts really, really helps. Spotify, whatever you can, wherever you can rate it. Anything at all, and I am all yours. Please send me any feedback, questions, whatever it is that you want to. My email ID is chuck@chuckofalltrades.in. All links are, of course, in the show notes. And for now, I am signing off from the interview portion of the first season of Getting Meta. See you next season with more interviews, but see you next week with more on what's going to come up over the next few weeks of the show. Thank you. Thank you for listening this far, not just for this very long episode, but the entire series. Thank you for listening to Getting Meta. See you soon.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
Get accustomed to womanhood.
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
Might get to wifehood
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
earn a livelihood,
Change the neighborhood.
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha,
And me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point.
to station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station, and hopefully Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcast's website, app,
Or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.